Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here. And I do hope and pray that this press conference finds you well wherever you might be tuning in from. But I can also tell you that we are just getting started. So please listen carefully. Conditions are changing very rapidly, and obviously we have a very dangerous situation on our hands with Hurricane Ida. And we can expect devastating impacts to continue for most of the next 24 hours or so as the hurricane passes through the state. As most of you are probably aware by now, a couple of hours ago, Hurricane Ida made landfall officially at Port Fourchon as a Category 4 hurricane with sustained winds of 150 miles per hour. As predicted by the National Weather Service, this is one of the strongest storms to make landfall here in modern times. And as had been projected, Ida rapidly intensified at an unprecedented rate right up until landfall. And the fact of the matter is, an extremely strong Category 4 storm or a Category 5 storm doesn't really make much difference. I think there's, 5 or 6, 7 miles per hour difference between the winds that were measured on Hurricane Ida and a Category 5 storm. By now, if you're in Ida's path and you've not already begun to feel severe weather, we can just about absolutely assure you that you soon will. If you're sheltering in place, please make sure that you're in the most secure place possible in your home, some interior space, and then please make it your business to stay there until the danger passes. And because of the possibility that severe winds will damage your home, it is a good idea to have a mattress nearby that you can use to put over yourself and other family members to protect you from any falling debris. We urge you not to be tempted to go outside, to take a look and start sightseeing, and for goodness sake, don't drive around right now. It just isn't worth it. The same really goes by for the immediate aftermath of the storm after it's passed by, because there will be down power lines, there's going to be standing water, there's going to be debris, other dangers, and quite frankly, we can't tell you yet how soon it will be before first responders are going to be able to respond to calls for assistance. So please don't go out. And the extent to which individuals decide to get out and about will inhibit the flow of first responders and search and rescue assets, high water vehicles, and so forth. So please be patient. Once the storm has passed, you need to be prepared to shelter in place for the first 72 hours. We have every possible resource ready to go to help you. We'll get there sooner than 72 hours, if at all possible, in order to rescue people across the state of Louisiana. But this is the window of time that it may take in order to get first responders to you, depending upon conditions. You should know that the entirety of the Louisiana National Guard has been activated, and currently more than 4,900 guardsmen are out in support of current operations. Just on the search and rescue assets of the National Guard, they're staged across 14 parishes. They have 195 high water vehicles, 73 boats, and 34 helicopters ready to support and assist the citizens of Louisiana. There remain 169 wildlife and fishery agents with trucks and boats in the same number in order to do search and rescue. And the most robust search and rescue effort that we have consists of more than 900 individuals making up 21 teams that are represented by 16 different states. And the numbers that I just gave you include the Louisiana State Fire Marshal's Office and their boats. The Department of Transportation has assembled 164 coaches and 20 paratransit vehicles. 185 coaches will be available by tomorrow morning. The Department of Corrections, our prisons, have produced more than 34,000 sandbags for communities across South Louisiana. They've also completed the evacuation of 2,500 inmates from 7 local jails, those being Acadia, Orleans, Plaquemines, St. Mary, St. Bernard, Vermilion, and Terrebonne parishes. The CPRA continues to monitor gates across the coastal zone. As of a little earlier today, a total of 459 gates out of 692 are closed. That's up 246 since the briefing yesterday. All of our hurricane protection systems have been have been completely closed, and all structures are fully operational at this time. As late as this morning, additional protection measures were being undertaken by levee districts, such as the South Lapouche Levee District. They actually completed sheet pile and sandbagging operations to address low areas ahead of the storm. Based on the hurricane track and the wind, rain, and surge forecast for the remainder of the hurricane, the CPRA is anticipating some overtopping of the southeast portions of the LaRose to Golden Meadow levee system, non-federal back levees around Middle Grove and Alliance in Plaquemines Parish, and non-federal levees in Lower St. Bernard Parish as well. And obviously overtopping is concerning, but I want to make sure that everybody understands overtopping and levee failure are not the same thing. And a levee failure can be much more catastrophic, and so they are not the same thing. Obviously, we're going to continue to monitor this flood protection system. I can tell you right now, we do not anticipate any overtopping of the Mississippi River levees or overtopping of the levees in the hurricane risk reduction system around the greater New Orleans area. Clearly, you've seen the reports, and up until a short while ago, I was able to look at live video feeds. There are very significant storm surge impacts around Port Fourchon and Grand Isle, as well as in Plaquemines Parish near Point Lahash and Braithwaite. CPRA has pre-staged pumps throughout southeast Louisiana and will deploy flood fighting assets to coastal parishes in need of dewatering as soon as it is safe to do so. This is obviously a very fluid situation. It is rapidly changing, and that's why everyone needs to stay abreast by listening to news and following the guidance from your local officials. Really, nobody in southeast Louisiana should be out on the roads, but if travel becomes absolutely necessary after the storm, please proceed with extreme caution. There will be hazards out there that you may experience before any law enforcement or DOTD personnel or anybody else may be able to get to first and warn you about it. This is especially true of debris, downed power lines, and standing water. Please check 511la.org for road closures, and please don't drive through standing water. That's how we lose an awful lot of people after storms. Many parishes are announcing curfews as we speak, so all Louisianans should follow the directives of their local leaders, which are obviously designed to keep us all safe. And the conditions vary by parish, and they have different considerations in mind. And so please honor these curfews and avoid needless risk to your own safety and that of your family. And please, again, keep streets clear for emergency responders. If you have evacuated, don't be tempted tomorrow to return before you know that it is okay for you to do so. Please contact your Office of Emergency Preparedness or monitor any announcements that they have as to whether it is the right time for you to return. The last count that I had shortly before coming over here is we have 1,542 individuals being sheltered across the state. That is in at least 23 different shelters. The vast majority of those are being operated by parishes. Obviously, we expect this number to increase throughout the day and potentially in the days to come as people discover that their homes are no longer habitable. For the latest shelter information, text LA Shelter to 898-211, or you can call 211. Heed the guidance of local officials. Local officials will have the most up-to-date shelter information for a specific area or parish. As we have mentioned several times before, if you lose electricity and you decide to use a generator, it is imperative that you follow the instructions from the manufacturer. Please make sure that generator is well away from your home in a well-ventilated area. It should not be inside, shouldn't be in a garage or a crawl space, under a window or a vent. And on occasion, you'll need to refuel the generator. Please make sure that you allow it to cool off for at least 20 minutes before doing so. In closing, and before I take some questions, there is no doubt that the coming days and weeks are going to be extremely difficult for our state. And many, many people are going to be tested in ways that we can only imagine today. But I can also tell you that as a state, we've never been more prepared. Again, all the models that we've seen from the Army Corps of Engineers and from our own CPRA show that the Hurricane Storm Damage Risk Reduction System will hold and perform as intended. Will it be tested? Yes. But it was built for this moment. I have a tremendous amount of confidence in the team that we've assembled at the state level, all the local officials and first responders and our federal partners. And by the way, I want to thank FEMA Regional Administrator Tony Robinson from coming out of Texas to embed with us here. And I can tell you that a short while ago I had a call with Administrator Criswell of FEMA in Washington, and she is very closely watching what's happening here, coordinating with us, and already has various things en route so that we can employ them just as soon as possible, things like generators and so forth. And so I have a tremendous amount of confidence in our team, all the state and local officials and our federal partners, but I want you to know I also have confidence in the people of Louisiana. They always continue to inspire me with their goodness and their decency and their generosity, and I know that they're going to do everything they can to protect themselves and their families and their neighbors, especially those who may have special needs. Maybe they're elderly, so forth. Please make sure that you check on them and stay safe. And I know it may not seem this way right now for many people out there across our state, but there is always light after darkness, and I can assure you we're going to get through this. And I do invite everyone to offer up a prayer for our state, for the people of our state, that we get through this just as soon as possible and in the best possible shape with the least loss of life. You know, property is replaceable. Lives are not. So that is obviously our first order of priority. So I'm going to stop there and take a few questions, and please feel free to direct your questions to any of the people that we have assembled here. And depending on what you ask me, I may ask them to come up and answer the question anyway. Yes? Yeah. It's weather dependent, and quite frankly, before the weather gets good enough for us to respond, it's going to also be dark. So what I can tell you is our expectation is that we will be ready at first light tomorrow morning to go out to those areas that we know already have received the most damaging impacts from the storm, principally wind and storm surge. You mentioned Grand Isle. I can tell you that the video that I've seen and the reports that I've received are just tremendous amounts of storm surge there and wind damage. The good news is, I hesitate to give you a figure, but something like 98% of Grand Isle evacuated. And the people who were there, I believe, stayed back in structures that are specifically designed and built to withstand these types of forces. But I have no doubt we're going to see extreme devastation, Grand Isle and elsewhere, but we will likely be sometime after first light tomorrow morning before we can get up in the air and get vehicles down there. And of course, you got to travel LA1. I don't know if you saw the video, but LA1 was not in good shape in the Leeville area earlier. So we will be working that just as quickly as we possibly can, and in all likelihood traveling to Grand Island elsewhere in that vicinity via helicopter.
Do you have any information as to the status of hospitals?
Yeah.
Whether any have been evacuated yet?
Yeah. Okay, so I can tell you no Tier 1 hospitals have been evacuated. Now, Tier 1 hospital is what we commonly think of as a hospital. By definition, we have some rehab hospitals, we have some behavioral health hospitals, and these are typically much smaller, and the patient's needs are not quite as acute. And we have evacuated 4 such hospitals. And since I'm on it, I'll tell you we've evacuated 22 nursing homes, 18 assisted living facilities, and 61 intermediate care facilities as well. No hospitals have been evacuated, Tier 1 hospitals, because quite simply put, there's nowhere to bring those individuals. They're in a hospital because they need that setting, and we don't have the capacity elsewhere. I mentioned yesterday that over the previous 11 days or so, we've been able to achieve a 20% reduction in our COVID inpatient census across the state of Louisiana. The good news is almost all of that happened in southeast Louisiana. But there's still 2,450 COVID patients in our hospitals across the state, in addition to all the other patients that remain in our hospitals. And that is a much higher number than we ever experienced in the first 3 surges. And so it's still a very daunting situation. And quite frankly, we're concerned, as we have been for a long time, about staffing. But these storms have an impact on staffing too, in terms of do they have to evacuate with their family for some reason? Does their home remain habitable so that they can live at home and go to work? And so we've got an awful lot of work to do, but we will have no higher priority than to make sure that our hospitals can remain in operation and functional. And that's going to be a challenge because we expect widespread power outage for some time. But we know that they have generators. We know that they have stocked up on fuel and water and food and on pharmaceuticals, things like oxygen and so forth. But quite frankly, we know that the longer the power stays out, the more challenging this is going to be. And the more devastation in an area, the harder it's going to be for them to have the staffing that they need. And, one of the challenges that we're having is we actually had additional staff coming in from out of state yesterday pursuant to contracts that we have executed. And the staff wasn't able to get in and because they didn't have any place to stay. There wasn't a hotel room open anywhere. And so that was a real challenge. And so I guess I say those things just to point out that their challenges are going to manifest themselves in ways that we can't even imagine now. But we have a great team here and across the state locally, and we're going to do everything that we can to prepare for every contingency that we can come up with right now. But this is going to be a very, very challenging situation. Yes, ma'am. I'm sorry, about the what that went down? Oh, yeah. We have not received any word that any of the hospitals are having any challenges at the moment. And I can tell you, I had a conversation with many of the CEOs of the largest hospitals. They really felt like that they were more prepared than they probably have ever been for a hurricane. But that doesn't mean that they won't have significant challenges. But as I stand here before you, I have not heard that there's any situation with respect to those hospitals because of any pumps or power issues.
Can you clarify, were the hospital workers that couldn't get in, were they supposed to come because of the hurricane or because of COVID?
No, they were just COVID-19 surge staff that we had contracted with. To come down. And we're still going to get them, but what happened is the vendor actually had to turn around and send them home, and they're going to come down a little bit later. again, that just adds to the challenges. Yes, sir.
Are there any areas that you would evacuate as much as you want to
Yeah.
that you're concerned about?
You know, it's a little too early to know that. Clearly, the areas that needed to evacuate the most were those closest to the coast, outside protection systems, and really those inside protection systems that are not built to the same standard, for example, as the hurricane and storm risk reduction system. We believe that the vast majority of those individuals chose to evacuate, starting on Friday after lunch, but principally yesterday. And if you just look at if you were able to see the interstates and the U.S. highway system and the number of people that were evacuating, it was well after midnight before that cleared. And so we do believe that the vast majority of people did decide to evacuate when they were told to do so, either because of a voluntary or a mandatory evacuation order. But I'm under no illusion that everybody did that. And I fully expect that starting tonight, maybe now, but starting tonight for sure and tomorrow morning, we will be getting calls from individuals who need to be rescued because they did not evacuate. And that's why we have robust search and rescue assets and personnel on hand. Yes, sir.
What role will the state play in post-storm evacuations from New Orleans if necessary?
Yeah.
And secondly, what accommodations do we
Yeah.
make for COVID in terms of setting up shelters?
Okay. So one of the reasons, and the principal reason we have 185 coach buses available by tomorrow, the vast majority of them are on hand now, is so that we can move people as needed. And so when individuals, and this is not just true for New Orleans, but anywhere in the state of Louisiana, if they cannot stay at home and they don't have a place where they can go with a neighbor or a relative or a friend or whatever, then they're going to need transportation perhaps in order to get to a place where they can stay. It could be a shelter, as you just mentioned. And that's the role of these buses if they don't have the ability to transport themselves. And so we are already coordinating with all of our offices of emergency preparedness, and that includes Orleans Parish, in order to be able to do that. And we have a pretty sophisticated way of doing it, and you figure out which areas, either because of standing water or a lot of destruction because of the wind and so forth, need to be evacuated. And really you get a great feel for that when you start the search and rescue operations. And you move those people to what we call a lily pad. And you can do that from the high water vehicles or from the boats and so forth. From there, you move them by bus, and you're going to move them. We can't identify those places today. I mean, we've got them set up and organized, but where you go to will depend on where you're moving from. And we're going to have these buses available in order to do that. Now, with respect to COVID-19, it presents special challenges at our shelters. And I've mentioned this before. You don't want to conduct sheltering in large open rooms any more than is absolutely necessary because of the transmission of COVID. This is especially true now because 100% of the cases of COVID in Louisiana are attributable to the Delta variant, which is highly transmissible. And we know that. We've been dealing with this variant now for many, many weeks. And so we will do more at the shelters in terms of cleaning. Mask usage is obviously it's subject to the statewide mask mandate, and it will be strictly enforced. We're going to have more distance between family groups. Now, the challenge there is that greatly reduces the capacity in your shelters. And then we will move to non-congregant sheltering just as quickly as we are able to do so. And principally there, what we're talking about are hotels. Now, that's not quite as easy as it was, and it was never easy before, because hotels have many more people in them today. But right now, we have a lot of individuals who've gone to hotels first. And then hopefully they're going to have homes that they can go home to tomorrow. And if they don't, then we're going to start sheltering them. And those individuals who have to be moved out of their homes, we will start sheltering them as well. We will use congregant sheltering at first, but only to the degree necessary, and we will transition to non-congregant sheltering just as we were able to do so. Yes, sir.
Can you explain, for folks who, the storm may pass over them tonight, why search and rescue operations or other operations can't really go?
Well, because you have dangerous conditions out there for first responders. You can't operate these vessels in these boats, for example, in hurricane conditions. You can't operate these high water vehicles in hurricane conditions. And it doesn't help anyone to dispatch first responders on a call if you're actually going to cause the first responder to be in a very bad situation in terms of either getting hurt or killed or just being stuck, where they then have to either ride it out there or you send somebody else. So this is why we tell people you've got to be prepared to stay for the first 72 hours on your own. I hope and pray, and we're going to work extremely hard to make sure nobody has to stay in their home for 72 hours after they need rescuing. But everyone should be prepared to do that, because we can't tell you when the conditions are going to be favorable enough for us to be able to get out, how many people are ahead of you on that list, and so forth. So please do everything you can to stay safe. Follow all the instructions that I've been talking about. You can look at the Weather Channel and local news, and everybody's putting out the same information. We just need people to do that, and we're going to work as hard as we can to rescue those individuals starting tomorrow. But nobody should be expecting that tonight a first responder is going to be able to answer a call for help. Yes, ma'am.
Can you say how much the congregate shelter, you said there's a reduction in the capacity, but can you give a reference of how much? And do you guys have a number in terms of contracts you have for hotels and where you might?
Yeah. I don't believe we have a contract for hotels yet. Now, we have been talking to hotels. We know where the vacancies are, and we know which hotels are interested in entering into a contractual relationship with the state. And we've been doing that all over the state. As far as shelters, the total capacity of the 23 shelters that are open is 10,322. And as I mentioned, I think there are only about 1,400 people at shelters right now. So there's a good way to go on the existing capacity, but those capacity numbers reflect the diminished capacity because of the distancing requirements of COVID. And we have contingencies in place to very quickly open additional congregant shelters as necessary. So we're going to grow that capacity even more. But no matter what we do, we intend to, as quickly as possible, transition away from congregant sheltering and into non-congregant sheltering. Okay, so one more question. Okay, go ahead.
This storm made landfall that's working its way across South Louisiana. What's your biggest concern or fear right now?
Yeah. Well, look, my biggest concern is probably the same as the vast majority of people of Louisiana. Just how destructive is this storm going to be? How many lives are going to be turned upside down because of damage to their homes and their places of business? But principally, it's how many lives are we going to lose, both as a direct result of the storm and an indirect result of people not being safety conscious as they use their generators or start to clean up, or if they get impatient and start to drive before they should. These are the things that typically result in more deaths than the storm, and it includes heat exhaustion, especially if you don't have an air conditioner to cool your home and you're out working and you're not accustomed to that kind of work in the heat. Then you can succumb to heat exhaustion. I think we lost 9 individuals last year for that. So those are the biggest concerns. They're all about saving lives at this point. And then beyond that, we will start working to deal with property damage and destruction issues as well. And they're going to be considerable. And you know, you asked me the question, what are you worried about the most? And all of us, you know, my mind has a lot of things on it, and but not the least of which is the restoration of electricity. And we all want electricity this time of year because it's hot and it's humid. I am most concerned about it this time because of so many people in our hospitals. And I understand that generators are great, but over time, they tend to fail. And so getting the power restored quickly, but having prioritized restoration so that your most critical needs are restored first is going to be really, really important. And until we can make that happen, and by the way, there may be 30,000 linemen available in the state of Louisiana to restore power after this storm. I don't know that we've ever had that number before. But prioritizing their work is going to be critically important, and making sure that we can quickly respond with additional generators and maintenance and so forth and fuel between now and then, so that those hospitals and other critical assets that are under generator power, if their generator goes down, we're very able to quickly get that power back on. And we're talking about hospitals, but dialysis centers are incredibly important as well. And dialysis requires an awful lot of water, and so your water systems can't go down. And we've had recent experience with this, right? It was Laura and Delta last year, the winter storm as well, knocked water systems out, and you really have a very difficult time at that point just delivering basic service for people who have the most critical needs, like dialysis. And there's an intersection between people who need dialysis and people who are especially vulnerable to COVID too. And so, you know, making sure we can continue to do all the monoclonal antibody infusions, because that is one of the best tools that we have in order to prevent people from needing a hospital bed after they contract COVID and become symptomatic. And so we have to have a very robust effort, and you can't allow it to be interrupted unduly and for too long after the storm. So we're going to have to stand that back up. There are more things than I have time to go over. And as it happens, we're going back to GoSEP now, because we're going to sit around the table and we're going to spend hours trying to identify every contingency that we believe may be applicable on those most important missions that the state has, which is principally life-saving in the immediate response to the storm. Was there anything that anybody over there wanted to add before we close out? Well, again, thank you all for continuing to cover this. We have a long ways to go, both as this storm continues to move through our state, but also in the days and likely the weeks to come. So we're asking for people to be patient. We're asking for people to pay attention to the local folks and do what they're asked to do, and understand that we're going to be working just as hard as we can with all of our local and federal partners to bring relief, especially life-saving relief, just as soon as we're able to do that. I don't know when I'll be speaking to you all next. Christina, do we have? Okay. We will let you know. And tomorrow I'm hoping that we can get up in the air and go travel around, visit with people, and get our eyes on exactly what the damage is. And that's one of the reasons we're not going to schedule a press briefing tomorrow, but we may likely have one. But you'll be told what time and the location of that later. So thank you. Let's continue to